Welcome everyone to Series 9, Episode 4 of In Suspense, a podcast and vodcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Nikki Smith and my co-host today is the lovely Lauren North.
Hello.
It's great to have back after Leslie and I were chatting last week to the amazing Sam Holland and Alice Hunter about the do's and don'ts of serial killers, which was such a fascinating episode. I thought both of the authors we had on brought up such interesting points, and some of the things they said actually really surprised me. So if any of our listeners haven't had a chance to listen in yet, do tune in.
Yeah, it was a great episode. I really found it interesting what Sam said about why people find serial killer books appealing, which was something I hadn't considered before. But this week we are discussing the topic of writing on trend, and we've got the fabulous guest of Ruth Kelly, who is going to talk to us about The Villa, which ticks all the boxes of writing on trends. That's exciting. But before that, Nikki, what have you been up to and how are you?
Well, I'm waiting for my next set of edits to come in for the guests, which is always a bit of a nerve-wracking time, but I've also been very excited because I have had the title and a blurb for the book that's coming out in July 2024. And a placeholder's gone up on Amazon actually for it, and it's another destination thriller, and it's called The Guests. It's set on a luxury island in the Maldives, so if you want to find out a bit more about it, then you can have a look on Amazon, and there's a little bit of a blurb.
And pre-order.
And of course, yes, pre-order. Thank you very much. Yes. And how about you, Lauren? What have you been up to?
Well, it's been a bit mad, as I don't suppose anyone's surprised. So I was waiting for my second set of structured edits for my 2024 book, which the title has not been announced for, so I won't tell you. So I was writing a first draft, and I just wanted to get 40,000 words and then have all the rest completely planned out so that I can jump back into it. So I did that. I did that on like the Tuesday. I finished on Tuesday at 1:00, and then by 3:00 I had the structured edits in. So they're now in, almost finished. I feel like I've turned the corner with them, but I've also got page proofs for another book, the audio on Friday. So it is a little bit touchy, but by the time this episode goes out, I'll probably be back writing the other book again. So it's fine. And yeah, exciting news for me today is that my first Bookature book, My Word Against His, is a 99p deal on Kindle Countdown. So that's exciting. So I'm like frantically checking my ratings and going, why am I checking my ratings? And still checking them. So that's always fun.
Indeed, yes. Yes, I think all authors do that whenever their book's on some kind of a deal that they know about, isn't it? It's sitting there and it's just waiting for the rankings to refresh. And I think this week there's been all kinds of problems week with Amazon, where nothing was moving. And so people were just looking and it was like, my book's stuck, it's not going anywhere. So at least this time they are moving, Lauren. So hopefully we shall see yours shoot up the charts. Yes.
Fingers crossed, yes.
So our topic today is writing on trend. I think in publishing we can often see that there are particular genres or themes that suddenly seem to be everywhere and something that everybody is talking about. So kind of cozy crime, for example, I think ever since Richard Osman published his series, the popularity for that genre has gone through the roof, and we've seen all kind of similar books come out, often even with similar covers, similar names, because publishers want to obviously jump on that trend to take advantage of it.
Yes, there was that article, wasn't there, that Richard Osman had created a genre, I think, which upset quite a lot of cozy crime authors. But I just think it's great. It's got so many people reading cozy crime, and it just helps everyone. So that's really good. But I do completely agree. And I think one of the issues is that we see these kind of trends start to come up. But as authors are always told, don't write to the market, because especially in traditional publishing, by the time you've written the book and then had it out, I mean, it's 2 years down the line at least, isn't it? And often longer. And by that time, the trend has come and gone. So it's finding that sweet spot, isn't it, about deciding to write something that you hope is going to be at the start of a trend, and I hope it hits the market at the right time and someone else hasn't jumped on the bandwagon. So it is a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I know my next book, The Beach Party, and the book that Ruth has written that we'll be talking to her about, The Villa, they're both destination thrillers, and that's kind of been mentioned as a leading trend at the London Book Fair this year. But I had no idea when I wrote it, because obviously you kind of go back 2 years.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that everybody was going to be wanting to read destination thrillers. So I don't think you can necessarily write for the market, because it's just too far ahead. You've just got to write what you love.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And it's strange how trends happen like that. And it's worth considering that some trends are a bit of a flash in the pan. Is that the right expression? A flash in the pan? It is. I wasn't sure. Yeah. Last year or the year before, we saw those snowy locked room mysteries all up a mountain, which were brilliant. But there was about 4 or 5 that came out all around the same time, which was really interesting to see. And then that's gone again. And now we've got exotic thrillers, as you say, but I really think that has taken off since the pandemic, and it feels like, rather than a trend, it feels almost like it's its own genre now, I think. So I think that one's here to stay, because it's always lovely to read thrillers set in lovely locations, I think. So yes, very current.
It is, yes. It's nice escapism, isn't it, I think. So maybe it's time to get our guest on to answer some of our questions that we've got about this. So let's welcome Ruth Kelly to In Suspense.
Welcome, Ruth, to In Suspense. Before we dive in with our questions on your fantastic book, The Villa, we'd love it if you could introduce yourself to the listeners, please. You can just read your bio, or you can just say hi about yourself.
Well, luckily I printed out my bio, so I can read that. Ruth Kelly has ghostwritten a string of Sunday Times top 10 bestsellers, most recently The Prison Doctor, which sold over 250,000 copies, and The Governor, which went straight in at number 1 on Amazon charts and number 5 in the Sunday Times bestseller list. The Villa is Ruth's debut thriller. She's drawn inspiration from her years working as a reporter for national newspapers, as well as her experience writing for TV shows, most notably with Endemol, the creators of the original reality show Big Brother.
Wow, that's an amazing bio. So interesting. Now, your debut novel, fiction novel, The Villa, was out in ebook and audio on the 25th of May, and it's coming out in paperback on the 22nd of June, I believe.
Yeah.
It's been described as a deadly reality TV thriller, and I think Veronica Henry said it was a scorching, smouldering, turbocharged cocktail of sun, sex, and secrets, which I completely agree with.
All right.
I read it over a couple of days and found it incredibly difficult to put down. It really was so thrilling. But we would love it if you could please tell us a little bit about what the book's about.
Well, it's about a bunch of single people that go into a villa on a private island off the mainland of Spain. We don't know who owns this private island, so there's lots of mystery surrounding these different components of the story. But the main protagonist is a journalist who's going undercover. Her name is Laura, and she doesn't really want to do it, but she's feeling pushed into it. And then things take unexpected and a bit nasty turns as the show unravels and the various things happen or are done to the contestants, and most of it is out of their control. I used to be a journalist, so I think I deliberately chose a journalist as the protagonist because I was writing from what I know. Obviously, I haven't been in a reality TV show, but
you've worked on one, so you couldn't be a better person to have written this book.
Yes. Yeah, I've definitely been in the environment and seen how it's run. Yeah.
I absolutely loved it, Ruth. I thought it was really page turning, and as Lauren said, and I've been hooked on Love Island for several series. I think it starts again today, actually. I think one of my daughters was saying in the car on the way to school this morning, I was like, oh no, that's disastrous. Now I've got edits to do. I thought your book was such a brilliant idea. It kind of took that concept and it dialed up the drama that we're used to seeing on the screen even more, and so the reader could kind of have the opportunity to see what happens when the elements that we all love watching in a series like this are taken to the absolute extremes. I thought it was really, really good. So do you want to tell us a bit about where you got the idea from?
So the idea actually came to me quite a long time ago. It was 2019, but I was called away on some ghosting assignments, so I couldn't really carry on with it. But so, yeah, I think the idea came from a mixture of working in journalism. I often keep one eye on the news constantly. I think a lot of my ideas are news driven or news inspired. And I have a guilty pleasure of watching reality TV shows, always have. I think it's my way of switching off. And, you know, the equivalent of watching Netflix. But yeah, I'd probably tune into a reality show instead. I think it was around 2019, things were starting to take a bit of a turn for shows like Love Island. There was a darker side was beginning to surface, you know, tragic things were happening in reality TV. And I think my news brain started to latch onto that because I've, for years, working as a reporter or feature writer in magazines, my whole job, part of my job was to see a story, see an idea and pitch it. And I saw it immediately and I thought, you know what, this tide is turning and something's going to happen here. I think this could make a very interesting talking point. And I felt quite strongly about it as well. I felt that these tragedies weren't right. And I wanted to mix the idea of a thriller with actually, you know, saying something.
We're going to talk about this in a little bit because it's really on trend at the moment with the types of books we're seeing. And I think that you have absolutely captured that darker side, because when I read it, there were places where it felt very uncomfortable to read. And there's a scene quite early on where the contestants have to make cocktails together. And you can see exactly what the viewers were watching, but you were inside the heads of the contestants and how uncomfortable they were with like having to be very intimate with people they'd only just met. And it was really uncomfortable. And I wondered if you planned it to have sort of this gorgeous setting versus sort of the darker themes that came out.
I always planned for the darker themes to come out because that was the point of what I wanted to achieve in a way. And I do think the idea of having on the surface beautiful destination where things can lurk underneath that are out of your control complemented that storyline quite well. I don't know if it was never a question in my mind that the setting of the book had to be on a rocky Spanish island. I think it just, you know, that came to me instantly. And then I used the different parts of the island to draw out the sinister feeling that was going on inside the villa.
Yeah. And it was done so well.
Yes, was really well. Now I've got 6 characters in my next book, The Beach Party, and I wasn't sure whether it was going to be too many for the reader to remember. But you've got 4 women and 4 men who start off in the villa, haven't you? And I just wondered, from a writing perspective, how you landed on that number. Is it because you wanted it to feel realistic to the shows that are kind of on TV? And did you worry about how the reader was going to kind of take all those characters on board?
It's such a great question because this was the most terrifying thing for me about bringing too many characters in and making them sound different. And I think this was the biggest stumbling point for me. But I knew that it needed to be a game show. It had to be that amount, and I actually took the minimum amount so I could. Like the least amount of characters that I could work with, but still pull it off as a game show. I mean, it rises to 10. I think I started with 8 to then go on to 10, but which is part of the plot line. But it's I think having lots of characters really terrifies me because then your characterization can start to dwindle. but I went for it. I just thought, oh, there's no way around it if I want to make this book work.
You've done it really well though, and I think they are all distinct. They are all so different, and they're all like the game show. They're big characters as well.
Right.
So it's a really good thing, I think, to choose to make people who are, incredibly extrovert in a lot of cases, and you're definitely going to remember who they are. So
yeah, which is exactly how it is in a show, isn't it? You don't have someone who's quiet in a reality show very often. Now, our topic today is writing on trend. And I think this novel feels bang on trend at the moment with the books coming out. So it's the summer, it's a destination thriller, and it incorporates reality TV themes, which we're seeing loads of this year. And hopefully next year, because I've got a reality TV book coming out next year.
Oh, do you? Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, but we're hoping the trend will carry on.
It will.
And you've managed to combine both of those. And I wondered if you were writing if you knew that it was going to come out, that it was going to be this sort of quite on point trend, or do you think it was one of those things, it's just luck, you happen to write it and these trends have come out?
Well, I'm absolutely amazed that a whole bunch of books are reality TV themed that are coming out. I don't know what's happened, but as I mentioned earlier, the idea was born a long time ago from watching, back in 2019, from seeing to watching the news and the different stories coming out. So I think timing wise, it could have come out earlier maybe, but if I'd written it earlier, if I'd be lying if I said I don't have a way of tapping into trends, and that really is linked to my career as a ghostwriter. I do watch trends, and I think they fascinate me.
It's so interesting that you are someone who sees yourself as sort of seeing the trends in advance, because we interviewed Sarah Vaughan last year, I think, who was a political journalist and has gone into being a writer. And she said something really similar about sort of keeping one eye on the news and sort of seeing what was coming from a story perspective. So I do wonder if journalists have a little bit more sort of foresight than the rest of us do on what's coming with trends. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think what you said about about the fact that you can see, like this year, there's all the destination thrillers and reality TV thrillers as well that are kind of coming out, and as we all know, how long it takes for a book to actually A, get written, and then B, kind of get a deal and get published. That there must be something that happened back then, any time between kind of 2018 and say 2020, that's kind of formed in a lot of people's minds at the same time, that they think, oh yeah, that's a really good idea, and then suddenly you end up in 2023 with all these kind of books publishing. But you've obviously ghostwritten several Sunday Times top 10 best-selling non-fictional novels as well, which, congratulations, that's absolutely amazing. And do you think there's the same concept of trends in non-fiction then as there is in commercial fiction?
Like 100%. I think I would say that my career in ghostwriting has been led by trends. So just for those who don't know about ghostwriting, there's different ways to get a book deal. So you can either take the publisher has the subject that you're going to write about, and they look for a ghostwriter. They look for a match in what's called, which is not very PC, but a beauty pageant, and where they get a bunch of ghostwriters to come in and meet the person and see if they connect and if they can work together. Or you can go about it a different way, and you can find the book yourself and find the subject matter and then present it as a package to the publishers. And that's what I've largely done as my career. Finding stories. I think only a couple of times been in these lineups, and so to do that, I think I would very much have to have an eye on trends and on the news. And so when I started out my career, I was in a trend called at the time misery memoir, which were quite sort of dark books, real life stories, tragic stories, and there was a huge market for it. So I did a number of those. And then there was a whole trend for animal-led books, like, My Best Friend Is My Dog and He Saved My Life. And I did a whole trend, like I rode on that wave, and I did a whole bunch of those. And then when I did the Prison Doctor, I think it's called the Professional Confessional. That's what it's known.
Okay.
And I think that I was at the beginning of that curve. I think The Secret Barrister was probably one of the only books out at the time. I met Dr. Amanda Brown, and I have this sort of news sense that I just knew instantly that it was a book, and then sort of just asked her, will you do a book with me? And I think I didn't know that it was going to be such a huge hit at the time, but I was riding the start of a wave of the Professional Confessional, which is continuing now. I think if you were to pitch a book like that, you would certainly get a book deal. Everyone loves this idea of having access into an area that you wouldn't normally go into, like a prison or maybe a doctor. I think nonfiction is completely trend-led.
Wow,
that's
I would
so
never have thought that.
No. So what's next, Ruth? What's next on the nonfiction trends, do you think?
Do you know what? I'm a little bit out of the loop because I've become obsessed with fiction. But I don't know if I can answer that for you. That's how bad I am. I think there's always a true crime is always a great one. If you could mix true crime with a professional confessional, you might have your secret formula there. I think if you were to do a sort of a tell-all book inside an institution of some sort, I think it needs to be different to really, you can't do another prison, you can't do another doctor story, but if you could think of something original, you could be, doing well there. So
that's so interesting. And does the market work in the same way for nonfiction as it does for kind of commercial fiction, in terms of, well, commercial fiction, traditional publishing, I should say, because obviously digi-publishing can be a lot quicker, but does it take around a year from like when you get the idea to the kind of finished book, or does it take you longer because you've got to kind of interview people and spend time with them?
So I think the whole thing takes a year. I don't know if I've got a memory that's scrambled, but all my memories of nonfiction is trying to catch my breath and trying to deliver it on time. I wrote a book in 6 weeks, 80,000 words once. Never.
That's like Lauren can do
again.
That. I can't do that. She can do that. Yes.
Can you? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So I think I would pitch a book idea, and then it has to, I just know, I always get this feeling of like, it's all go, go, go. Book has to be delivered by this date and it comes out. So I think it is a lot quicker than in fiction. I don't know the actual time, but for some reason in my head, I'm thinking the whole thing takes a year, but that sounds impossible. The interview process, I will go and sort of often like rent a hotel near where the person lives and follow them around and annoy them for a week to a week and a half of intense interviews on my digital recorder. And then I'd go back and I'd start planning it, and then I'd write it.
Amazing. It sounds so fascinating. And so it's completely out of what we know in our industry as well. Even though it's so similar, it's also completely different. I wonder, do you think authors should ever be encouraged to write for the market? Or do you think people should just write what they want to write, and almost the old adage, write what you know?
I think that the answer to this really depends on the sort of person you are. I don't think there's anything wrong with writing to a trend, but I think you've got to be quick, because trends change so quickly. And what I'm learning in fiction is that the whole process is a lot slower. So what you're thinking is trendy now probably isn't going to be when you bring your book out. I mean, I think the ideal, if you wanted to be that sort of writer, would be to try and get your magic ball out and work out what the trend is going to be in 2 years. And I don't think that's completely impossible. I know people will probably argue that it is, but if you watch I think if you watch the news and you watch how people react to things and you see what's changing, you might be able to catch on to some sort of wave. I mean, you can never predict what's going to happen, but there are signs. I do believe there are signs of what's going to be popular and what's not. There's so many trends. I mean, I actually wrote down a list of trends. I think the locked room mystery, having multiple voices told in the first person is really trendy. There's trending locations for the destination thrillers. Like I think islands are a really, trendy place to put it now. The cozy crime genre, a likable villain who's killing off people. You could jump on any of these waves and you'd still probably be all right. But I think every story, this is what would often come up in discussion when I worked in magazines and newspapers. Every story, I think, has been told before in some way. But skill as a writer is to tell it in a different way. And there's so many different ways of telling a story. And it might just be a tiny change, a little tweak, and you can completely flip a story on its head. And I think that is more important than a trend in a way, because if you can just, tell something that everyone can relate to, but in a different way, I think you could be onto a winner.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's so true.
Fascinating. Yes.
And you've set the villa on Aruna, which is in the Balearic Islands. But that's an imaginary place, right?
Yeah. I went through a few name changes.
Yes. And do you think is there an advantage, do you think, to setting it somewhere where nobody knows it because it doesn't actually exist?
So I did. I had a little look at private islands off Spain that you could buy, and there was 2 for sale, and neither had a very sexy name. I thought no. Plus, I probably couldn't set them there. I don't know what the legalities of that were. I think if you do write a destination thriller, I think I personally like basing on a true place, but then having the freedom to make it my own by not naming it after the place, because I'm really worried that maybe readers will go, well, you got that fact wrong, and
they will.
That street isn't where it should be, and
yes.
So that takes that problem away, and plus it gives you more freedom to create all the different things there. So I never thought it was always going to be a fictional island.
So we've talked about some trends in non-fiction, and we've talked about some trends in fiction. And what I'd love to know, and we're going to talk about this as well, we've got some ideas as well, is what your predictions are for the next trends in commercial fiction.
Well, consulting my crystal ball, I think you have tapped into a huge trend with your book, The Ugly Truth. I think the presentation of text in a different format is a huge trend, and I think it's a wave that's going to keep rising. So I think this idea of Daisy Jones and the Six, this not Netflix, but this documentary style way of writing things, or interviews or podcasts, and I think what might come out is a new way, and a new way of presenting it beyond podcasts and documentaries, but something fresh, if you could take that into the market. But this is a trend that's going to keep going, and I think it's nice. I think it's nice to see words presented in a different way and creating impact and meaning and engaging the reader. And I think the translation into TV and film from that is strong, because you're almost writing it for them. Yes. So
we can only hope, Ruth. We can only hope. It's great news for Elsie North, I would say.
And it's fast, isn't it? That's the thing. Like when you're reading it, it's pacey, and I think that Lauren and I have had discussions on this, but in today's market, you need to be able to compete against other kind of forms of entertainment like Netflix and things like that. So if you can pick up a book and read it quickly, it's very immediate. I think that's very attractive to a lot of readers.
And in this month's Writing magazine, I've actually written an article on do's and don'ts for writing this style. So if anyone is interested, they can have a little look. What about you, Nikki? What do you think are the next trends?
I don't know. I'm really rubbish at predicting trends, actually.
You just managed to get them.
I'm like Ruth. I had, my idea for a destination thriller, I think, came out of the pandemic, and and the fact that there was a lot of people sitting at home all day, every day, staring at the same kind of four walls and stuck in their houses. I think that made a lot of writers automatically try and find something bigger, something, take me anywhere else, basically. So I think that might have sparked that kind of trend. But yeah, I agree with Ruth in terms of, I think that different ways of presenting text on a page, I think that is going to be something that stays with us and develops. But as for themes, I don't know. How about you, Lauren? What do you think?
Well, I've got a very strong feeling about 2025, but I'm not going to share it because I'm planning to actually write a book on that subject. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. Okay. I don't want it to be stolen. Wow. But what I do think we're going to see more of is, because I think it always keeps coming back around, is I think we're going to see locked rooms again. I think they're going to come back. And we've had destination thrillers, and I think we're going to see original destinations, as in not exotic but strange places. Yeah. So we've had a few boats and we've had up mountains, and I think there's going to be, people are going to tap into some really different locations. So that'll be really interesting. And then the other thing I think is going to really come out in the next few years is more AI thrillers. So we've seen In the Blink of an Eye by Joe Callahan, and I think we're going to see, because it's what us as authors are all currently worrying about and talking about, I think in a couple of years' time we're going to start seeing how it's taking over our lives a bit. So I think, and that'll be really interesting to see as well. And we've got like The Marriage Pact by John Miles already. So there's a few, and I think we're going to see a big wave of those. So that they are my predictions.
I've got another one. Probably shouldn't share these, but I think the professional confessional in fiction form, there's room for that too, because you notice it in things like, there's lots of books about maids, that sort of behind the scenes or parts of something looking on, and it doesn't just have to be a maid. There's so many different people.
Careers. That's like the housekeepers, isn't it? The housekeepers, which is just kind of come. I think that's publishing now, or is about to be, and that's going to be massive, I think, as well.
Yeah, so, and in fact, I'm currently writing a book which I can't talk about because it hasn't been announced yet, which is a professional in a particular field, and it's their thriller, and that was something that was discussed by the publisher and wanting that. They said there's a gap in the market for this, so that was quite interesting. And that is actually going to be announced hopefully in a couple of weeks, so you won't have long to wait. But I think you're absolutely right. I think the professional things is going to be really interesting.
Yes, very, very interesting.
I'm sorry, I feel like I've said a few times already today now, I can't talk about this. I've got this, but I can't talk about it. So I do apologize to the viewers and the listeners who are like, oh, that Lauren knob. She's such a tease.
So I'm really interested, Ruth, to know what you're working on next. Are you writing another destination thriller? Is it something else, or is it something that we can't talk about?
I can talk a little bit about it. It's a destination thriller, but with the same kind of a news hooky side to it. I find it really difficult to write from things that I haven't experienced. So I took myself off to Switzerland recently to see if it was going to work on this research trip that scared the life out of me. So I wanted to know if I could base where I'm going to make this thriller on a mountaintop. So I went up this really big mountain. Wow. It's the first, the world's first revolving restaurant that was featured in on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
I was going to say, is it James Bond? Yeah,
which was made in 1969 with George Lazenby, and it was this cable car ride up, and I don't know what I was thinking. Firstly, I'm afraid of heights. It's okay, because I knew that I needed to do this, and I have done some silly things to overcome my fear of heights before, like skydiving and paragliding. It wasn't the end of the world, but I didn't realize. I just thought it'd be one cable car ride up, and it wasn't. It was 4.
Wow!
It just kept going higher and higher. And the drop down was just more terrifying each time. And there was one final stop before the last bit, and I actually froze, like, excuse the pun. And I just didn't know what to. I was like, I can't do that last bit. I can't. It looked like the wire would snap at any minute. I was shocked how they got an entire film crew up this mountain to this restaurant. Just was blown away by it.
How they got the whole restaurant up there, frankly. I had to build it.
But it was an incredible experience, like one of the best I've ever done in my life. I just think it was really worth it. And I could never have made it up. You know, what I'm writing, I could never have made it out without experiencing. I know lots of people have incredible imaginations, and they can write, make things sound really realistic without having gone to that place, but not this, I don't think. So I'm really glad I did it, and I think it's going to really make it easier and enhance my writing.
Wow, yeah.
So yeah, that's a little giveaway. It
sounds amazing. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Ticking all the trend boxes. And will we see that in 2024?
It's coming out winter 2024.
Exciting.
Yeah. Perfect timing.
It is perfect timing.
Yeah.
So before we go, Ruth, we love to ask our guests what they've been reading recently and what they'd like to recommend. So have you got anything you'd like to tell us about book-wise?
Well, I can. I've been reading and can recommend at the same time Lucy Clarke's The Hike. That's a real nice destination thriller. I really love the way that she makes her characters very three-dimensional. She really makes them come alive, and then she combines that with these incredible descriptions of wherever she is. So, you know, I'm all over that. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I'm reading at the moment.
Amazing. And what about you, Nikki? What are you recommending for us this week?
I will recommend, I've got this one, first of all, which is Reasonable People by Caroline Hulse, which is, I think, there you can see Reasonable People. I think that's out in August. It's not a thriller, but it does feature social media in it, and it's
so funny,
brilliant kind of social satire. Basically, it's just fantastic. It's definitely worth a read. It's really amusing, poignant, and loved it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I read it, I blurbed it, brilliant, loved it, love all of her books.
And then the other one is Catherine Ryan Howard's The Trap, which has got to be in my kind of top 3 of the year. Absolutely,
me too. It's phenomenal.
Phenomenal. So
stunning.
Yes, if you haven't read that, read it. It's one of those books that you read and just think, why am I bothering to write?
Yes, I'm
really good
because she's just moved to Transworld, and I'm hoping that she's going to be at the Transworld event at Harrogate, so I can thank her because I'm such a fan.
Well, pass on my huge congratulations. I thought it was amazing.
If she's there, and if there is an event,
How about you, Lauren? What have you been reading?
So we're mentioning again The Vanishing of Class 3B by Jackie Kabler, because you guys read it and recommended it, and then I was reading it, but I was really slow. I finished it. It's brilliant. Everyone must read this book. And then also All I Said Was True by Imran Mahmood. I'm listening to that at the moment. It's a legal style thriller because he's coming on as a guest, and I can't wait to talk to him about that. So that's it. So sadly, that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much, Ruth. It's been such a fascinating chat, and thank you so much for your insights as well. The Villa is out in ebook and audio now, and it's out in paperback on the 22nd of June, and it's a fabulous read, so do grab a copy.
Yes, indeed do. It is a fantastic book. We are back in 2 weeks when Leslie and Lauren will be talking to Natalie Simmons about her latest thriller, Good Girls Die Last. And the topic is the rise of the feminist thriller. So
yes, another great trend.
Another great trend, exactly. Yeah, so
Yes.
do tune in for that.
And that just leaves me with the final task of saying goodbye from Ruth. Goodbye, Ruth.
Bye.
Goodbye from Nikki.
Bye.
And goodbye from me. Bye-bye.